Thank you. Good morning, Ashland community, and welcome to, I think, webinar 4 in the past week with regard to the fall reopening 2020. Let me get through some logistics for you. First and foremost, if you can hear me fine, just raise your hand so I can identify that we're doing okay there. Awesome. Thank you so much. Next, we are being recorded and it's streaming on WACA's education channel, just so we're clear there. And thirdly, there's a Q&A section of the webinar that if you ask a question or if I haven't answered something as I go through the process this morning, and there's something specific, you can type the question in, and folks have the opportunity to hit a thumbs up, and that'll up the question. So if there's a question that many of you have stewing in your head and want to make sure I answer it today, just hit that little thumbs up mark, and it'll continue to move the question in priority up to the top, and we'll make sure we get that. Dr. Kyra is on the line with us, so he will be reviewing the Q&As just in case if I do answer them, then we will dismiss them as answered already in the process. First and foremost, thank you so much for taking the time this morning to be here. It's certainly still, as I look back from March 12th forward, been a very unusual and challenging time, not only for parents and children, but educators alike, trying to devise a plan that is appropriate, that keeps in mind the first and foremost goal, which is to ensure our students, faculty, and staff are safe and healthy and are coming into an environment that is safe and healthy as well and mitigates as much risk as we can. We do know, obviously, risk exists every day wherever we are as it relates to COVID or anything else. So to assume that we can mitigate all risk is not something that we're able to do. Many of you and your children are out in public now, et cetera. So we're devising plans that hopefully will work for our community. Let me give you an overview first. June 25th, and I had shared this with the community, the Commissioner of Education put out his initial guidance. Within that guidance, there were a few things that I think are critically important that were asked of school districts and superintendents in particular to start thinking about. One was to look at 3 models of learning that we had to report on, and we have to report on this on July 31st. So next week, we have to actually have this report ready to be submitted to the state. He had asked us to look at one, what would it look like to have a full in-person learning in all of our schools? So meaning every single student in the district, in classes, full days. And the one change that he made was to consider, and looking at some of the data at that time, and it has changed from the American Pediatric Association, was to look at moving desk or seating arrangements, the physical distancing from the recommended CDC guidelines of 6 feet down to 3 feet. So the guidance was pretty clear that you could go to 3 feet, but the recommendation is still 6 feet. So how do we build the classrooms, or can we build classrooms? And what would that look like in all of our buildings? In addition to that, what would it be like to transport those kids to school, understanding physical distancing requirements on buses? And I'll get into that a little bit later. But that was step one. We had to go in, and we are still doing this. We have set up classrooms, model classrooms in every one of the buildings at a 3-foot physical distancing for our children and a 6-foot physical distancing for our children. Do I believe that we could get all of our kids in using a 3-foot physical distancing? I do. Do I believe it's the right thing to do? I do not. I will not be recommending that we go down this road. When you pull, we're pulling all storage bins and things out of rooms and ancillary materials for the teachers use in order just to put the desk in position to meet the needs of a 3-foot physical distancing. More and more data is certainly coming out with regard to spread amongst young people, that it is occurring. And we, even those who are asymptomatic, obviously can spread. And so in the best interest of public health and health of our students, our faculty, and our staff, we will be moving forward, or my recommendation to move forward will be a 6-foot physical distance within the classrooms. And another piece of that puzzle was the commissioner stated, and it was a mandate, that all grades 2 through 12 must wear masks during the day, unless obviously there's a medical condition, and have mandatory mask breaks and built into your schedule, et cetera. The recommendation, however, is that all students, that includes pre-K through 12, wear masks, and that will be the recommendation I make to the school committee as well, that all students and faculty and staff, unless underlying medical conditions or do not allow for mask wearing. Very challenging it would be at Warren if you can think about 3 different grade levels and only 1 grade wearing masks, and K and 1 not having to do that, even though it's recommended. I'm going to be, asking the school committee to make that our policy here within Ashland. The second piece was to create a hybrid schedule, and you will be getting a survey, hopefully end of today or tomorrow. And hybrid schedules are designed where there's in-person learning, so kids are coming into the building, but there's also a component that is a remote learning. And what that looks like yet, we do not know. We are working through that as an admin team, and what works well at Ashland High School may not necessarily work well at Mendez or Warren, for instance. And because of the way schedules are designed, at the high school, you have 7 classes. They have 5 a day and drop 2, so there's a rotating schedule. Similarly at the middle school. So it's complex, to say the least, and how we go about ensuring that equity of getting into class, keeping a safe and healthy environment for our students, breaking out into cohorts, and by that we mean having groups of kids who are coming to school on the same days, limiting the exposure. I want to be clear, and I've said this in all my webinars, we can only do what we can do inside the structure of the Ashland Public Schools. It requires the students and families outside of the public schools to be vigilant as well, to do their part in reducing and mitigating any potential spread of COVID or putting people at risk. And that's something that is that we have to take seriously. So that's a piece of it. So a hybrid model could look like a group A. So I'm just using this as an example. It's not necessarily where we've landed, but a group A comes in, and I'll use grade 9 through 12. Students in grades 9 through 12 in the group A come in on Mondays and Tuesdays for a full day of learning. Group B, the rest of the kids in 9 through 12, are doing remote learning during that time and preparing for their re-entry into school later in the week. So kids come in 2 days a week. Then on Wednesday, we would have, and this is just one of the models we're looking at, Wednesday would be a remote learning only day for students, where we have the ability to then bring in and thoroughly disinfect and clean our facilities top to bottom. And then on Thursday and Friday, a new group of kids is coming in. So we've got an opportunity to Monday and Tuesday have the same kids in, Wednesday come in, and then have a really deep, thorough cleaning occur before the next group of kids come in. What that requires is a lot of planning and preparation from our educators. We recognize in the spring we did the best we could, but we also understand that the remote learning aspect of a hybrid, or the next model, which I'll talk about, has to be much better and much more well prepared, looking at assessments, attendance, looking at student accountability, et cetera. So that's a piece of the puzzle that we know we have to be, our delivery has to be a lot better this year for all remote learning. And then the third option was remote only. So if we're only in a remote setting, and I want to emphasize, I do believe at some point, based on the data that we're seeing across the country, that we potentially could be in a remote only session again at some point. So whatever we design needs to be flexible, adaptable, but also in alignment with the curriculum that we're required to teach, and that educators and are used to delivering, and students and families are used to receiving in terms of their high quality and the rigor of education in the Ashland Public Schools. And those are the three models, again, that we're required to at least present to the school committee, or excuse me, to the commissioner on July 31st. And then from there, we're required to actually make a final decision on what our structure looks like on August 10th. It has to be delivered to the state and for their approval. But more importantly, I believe we need to get that out to the community a lot earlier than August 10th. People need time to plan. There absolutely will be childcare concerns across the district. I get that. I understand that. There's really, I've said this, we're making decisions, and we're making that aren't necessarily going to satisfy all families' needs and wants within a organization of 2,800 students and the families we have. It's making the best poor choice possible, to be honest. And while doing so in a way that is trying to keep our students and our faculty and staff healthy and safe in this time of COVID, and going from there. That being said, we're going to continually evaluate and make adjustments. So a hybrid model might last, say, for 10 weeks, and then we reevaluate it. It might last for half the year, and then we reevaluate it based on the numbers that exist from the state and the direction from the state with regard to COVID numbers, vaccinations or whatever occurs, right? So it needs to be that flexible and adaptable that we can, I'd like to say seamlessly, but it's never going to be seamless, but moving from one structure into another structure. We don't want to discount the fact that we could be all of our students back in school at some point this year. I don't know. We don't want to discount the fact that all of our students could be remote at some point this year. That's probably a likely scenario given what we're seeing around the country and how many districts are viewing it, where they were supposed to start school in various states already and have decided they had to push pause. We're trying to be thoughtful of this, and I think that's sort of the commissioner's take on this at the state level. So that's pretty much where things are with regard to June 25th and the information that was sent out from the state. I would say that we've been working really hard as an admin team. All 5 buildings have their own task force working group, looking at scheduling, looking at the ins and outs of their own building and how that will impact students and educators alike. We are in the process and have already ordered tremendous amounts of PPE supplies. We have prepared and will be prepared to offer our district to be a full one-to-one technology district by this fall. So we recognize that many of our families struggled with having technology. So we'll be in a position where we can make sure all kids in our district have the necessary resources when we move into a remote or a hybrid model. I think what I will be looking for from families are a couple things. One, transportation is still a great concern to me. This is still guidance that has yet to come back from the Department of Education. And currently, the way it's designed on our buses is that we can only have, if you're looking at a 74-seat bus, it works out to be about 14 students that we can have on the bus at any one time. That means a student is sitting every other seat. Everyone with masks on, K through 12, that guidance is pretty clear. But some of the guidance they're looking at and we're hoping to get is, can we have in every seat, but staggered in terms of one on the window, one on the aisle, one on the window, one on the aisle? And if so, that could push up our numbers to about 25 to 26 students on a bus, which would certainly help with transportation. Siblings, any program that we design, we want to make sure that families have similar schedules. So the hybrid model would include making sure that families are on the same schedule. So Mondays and Tuesdays, or Thursdays and Fridays, or Mondays and Wednesdays, whatever that schedule becomes, making sure families have a consistent model for their own household. Obviously students will be able to, from the same household, will be able to sit together. So we might be able to get more students on the buses. There's a lot of logistics with the transportation. I have asked families that there are a couple things that you could do to help. One, if it is absolutely critical that you take the bus, great, fine, stay on the bus. If you believe that you will have your child walk, ride a bike, or be dropped off, or some other transportation provided, please let us know. Please email me or Erin Paolini, who is our transportation coordinator. Call her office if you've already signed up for a bus pass, and say, hey, you know what, we're good right now. We don't need to take the bus, and we'll find alternate transportation for our children or child. And that will help us logistically. There just are not any more buses for us to procure in order to minimize the impact that the physical distancing on busing will have on our organization. We've called our bus company. We've asked them to provide more buses, and they said they don't have any. And furthermore, there are no drivers available, and the employment of drivers is, or the ability to get drivers in is very limited right now. They don't, even from a state standpoint, they're reducing the requirements. It's tremendous requirements in terms of the practice and the skill set they have to have. But in the state is lessening that in order to try to attract more, but it's not really necessarily working. And I struggle with that from a safety standpoint. So transportation, again, if you don't need, please let us know, and then we can start planning appropriately how we're going to deliver transportation. Another piece that is missing is athletics. I know that's been a question for folks. The MIAA is the organization in Massachusetts that's in charge of all athletics, middle through high school. Again, the Ashland Public Schools has nothing to do with local youth sports, et cetera. And those are decisions that are made locally, and we do not partake in those. I would say that I anticipate the MIA making some statements here in the next week or two with regard to fall sports. I don't have any necessary inside knowledge to this. Inside knowledge, it's if we're looking at the data that's coming out of small colleges and universities around not only the Commonwealth, but the country, where fall sports are being canceled. I certainly think the state of Massachusetts is highly considering that. That will be a governor's decision. There may be a recommendation by the MIAA, but the governor certainly has full ultimate control over how and when and if we continue to play sports. We know the value, right? We all understand the value of educational athletics and activities for our kids, but there's a risk factor, and that's what they're trying to figure out. I think when I've watched youth sports and the congregating of our youth, they're certainly not following all of the physical distancing requirements that have been put forth by local boards, et cetera. And again, I can't control what I can't control. So whatever families are doing at home, I think it's important that we keep in mind how it might impact other families down the road. I read recently a statistic. I think it's about 13% of our households have elderly living with us now, as in the United States, and being cognizant of even asymptomatic transmission, et cetera. It's something we just need to be, from a humanistic standpoint, being thoughtful of. And the last piece is special education. We're still waiting on guidance from special education, and the commissioner has stated unequivocally that he believes that there are certain populations within our school body that needs to be in school more, and we have to figure out how to do that. And our most vulnerable students are those students that he's referring to. So we're looking into all of those subsets of categories that we need to be thinking about. Let me see. Okay, so a survey's coming home, like I said before, on different hybrid models. We just need. I would like your thoughts on that. Your input. It's just really a simple vote. I think this might work better for my family. We will ask students at certainly middle through high school their thoughts on it as well, and then that'll help guide us. It won't be the deciding factor, but it certainly will help guide us with regard to the models that we're going to consider. And that'll be a quick turnaround. Like I said, I would like to get our plan to the community by August 2nd. It's a week before it has to be submitted to the Department of Ed, but I think it's important that you all get to view it before it's submitted. And then I can have webinars, but then there'll be building specific webinars as well. The principals will hold these webinars because again, what we do at the high school may look very different than what we do at the Warren School. There will be questions, and I haven't looked at any of the questions here, but there'll be questions about remote learning. And what if we don't want to send our children back to school? What's the process there? And what I can tell you is you've got a couple options. One, all families under Mass General Law are entitled to homeschool their children. And that's just a simple process of calling the curriculum office and getting the application and filling it out, showing how you're going to cover curriculum, assessments, and be prepared to prove that's what you're doing for the year or whatever period of time that you decide to homeschool. The second option is we're investigating looking at creating the Ashland Public Schools Remote Learning Academy. And what I mean by that is a much more robust, rigorous online educational delivery for our students. It'll look different K through 5 than it does, say, 6 through 12. If families decide that they want to do remote learning only, it's critical that we know this because we have to plan our resources and reallocate our resources. Currently, I've just asked families, do you think you would do this? I will I most likely will ask for you to commit to a period of time that you're starting out remote. So if we're in a hybrid model and we're looking at 9 or 10 week segments, if you will, I may ask commit to the first half of the year remote only, and then you can modify your decision after that. And after we're looking at data, if you feel more comfortable sending your child back, if it's just not working for you, and that would be really helpful to us. The state is looking at procuring a online learning platform where everyone is getting the same exact educational experience across the Commonwealth. From an equity standpoint, it makes good sense, but it may not make sense for Ashland. And certainly we know we are trying to build a better remote learning platform, synchronous and asynchronous. There's much value in asynchronous learning. So a flipped classroom model where you might get a video do the work, and then the teacher comes on and works through the lesson planning. And the synchronous is what most people want more of, like in-person learning, on these platforms. And we recognize that, and certainly there will be a greater component to that. So that'll be one of the questions that comes forth as well within the survey. And I would encourage you to encourage your neighbors and friends who have children in schools to fill that out. So last time we got about 50% of not bad in the middle of summer, 50% of the population, school age going families responded to the surveys. So, but I think we need a little bit more data than that. Okay, I'm going to pause for a moment. The next step I'm going to do is go through the questions that a number of folks sent questions in to the website, and where I've answered a lot of them here. So, but I'm still going to go through a lot of the questions. I'll read them, and questions that I haven't answered, that's what I will answer here, and then we will move into the Q&A section of the questions that you might have specifically if I have not addressed them currently. I want to emphasize that I won't have all the answers, and nor do I have all the questions. Meaning, every excuse me.
Please come to the main office. Dave, our custodian, to the main office. Thank you.
I apologize. That's the thing about it's fun being back in school, is where people are here and on intercoms. But I want to emphasize that as we pull apart one question, there becomes 5 more questions that relate to a specific topic. The layers upon layers in the complexity is a quite fascinating case study for me. And I think for all our admin, it's a challenge, but it's one that we're certainly up to when we think about outdoor learning environments and opportunities to change the way we deliver education. Those are exciting, and but they come with the uncertainty of what it might look like, and we have to be flexible and we have to be adaptable. And I think education itself is structurally not designed to be that way. At least it hasn't been in the public school models. But I think we're taking that opportunity to change that. Raise your hand if you're okay with me moving on now, please, and thank you. Awesome, thanks. Sorry, I have to keep taking some sips of my iced tea. These webinars have done a good job on my voice. So let me see if I can go back here. First question that was sent in is, can you share the preliminary findings from the survey that was sent out recently regarding remote, hybrid, and in-person options? And I want to share that, again, about 50% of our families did respond. And as we were looking at the survey, it just said with safety precautions. It did not, we didn't get into the nitty-gritty of 3 feet, 6 feet, 4 feet, mask, open windows, fans, etc. It was just if we had safety precautions. And so option 1, which was the desire of full in-person learning, is about 61%, 60.7% of our families who responded indicated at this time a few weeks ago that they would send their kids or wanted their kids to go back full time. It broke down at the high school about 63%, 62 at the middle school, 59 at the Mendez, 56 at Warren, and Pitaway was about 86%. Pitaway is a very small number, only about 24 students, or 28 students. Option 2 was a hybrid, about 28% of the families. And then there was about 12% of the families who said, we only want remote. We're only going to send our kids remotely. And again, this is about 50% of the population, 1,375 respondees. And it was interesting to note here, though, at middle school and high school, we're under 10% remote. So 6% at the high school and 9% at the middle. But Warren was at 18% remote only, and Mendez 15% remote only. So what that tells me is, again, as we look at our models, we have to think differently across the board. The high school and middle school folks, at least families, are feeling differently than the elementary families. And we want to be as consistent as possible with our structure as for ease of families. And like I said, there's no doubt, whatever decision we make, there will be someone who's quite upset about it. There will be some who are okay with it. There are some who will be pleased with it. I've resigned myself to the fact that it is a struggle trying to meet the needs of 2,800 individuals. And I just take my own house as an example. And I've used this, before. We have 4 different school districts in my house alone. My wife teaches in one district. I'm in Ashland, and my 2 boys, one in middle and one in high school, go to 2 separate school districts under 2, and they're all different, and they're going to be different. We have to figure out that within our own household as well. But I'm trying to be respectful of the data that exists within each of our communities and how we approach the educational environment that's being offered. Regional schools look very different, which both my boys go to regionals. And it's a struggle. So I recognize it. I can empathize with every one of the parents here who want just to be back to a normal setting and their kids in classes every day, all day. But I'm telling you, as a leader of an organization, not only from an educational component, and you may disagree with me on this, and I'm okay with that. I think my first and foremost obligation to you and to this community is to do the best we can to ensure that our 2,800 students who come to our schools are doing so in a safe and healthy manner, and our 400 plus employees are working in an environment that's healthy and safe as well, and not putting them at risk more than necessary. So that's the data. So let me go through these questions. Is school going to be a combination of both remote and some in person? I've addressed that. I would anticipate it'll be both, obviously. There will be a hybrid, there will be a potential for remote, but I also want to have the ability and the flexibility to move back into full in-person learning should the data and should the recommendation, be, or the requirement be pushed down from the state level. I agree. They talk about middle school age kids needing more specific instruction. I have a middle schooler, couldn't agree more. And that remote piece, more of a connection. And again, I could not agree more. I think there has to be more of that connection. I again don't want to discount the fact that the social emotional aspect of students since March and our families and the dynamics, I'm concerned about the fragility of our psyche and our well-being, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything to meet those needs. Jen Cutler, our Director of Social Emotional Learning and Counseling, is devising plans for each building and families so we can help address the concerns that relate specifically to the social emotional component of COVID and everyday life. In past meetings, you mentioned there may be a remote option for families. I just mentioned that is going to be an option, but we are going to look for a commitment so we can, again, allocate resources. I think I wasn't real clear with the models. 6 through 12, it's because the numbers are quite small. It's quite, and because students take numerous disciplines and the teachers are discipline specific, we will probably look at investing in online platforms, not necessarily teachers from the Ashland Public Schools teaching these classes, but I may not have a teacher I have a math teacher, for instance, who is teaching all the hybrid classes, but doesn't have the opportunity or the time to create 5 different remote classes for students who are willing to stay home or want to stay home and families who are keeping their children home. So we're looking at vendors who do this as in their educational space, and high quality. I mean, we've been doing it for years, my 11 years here in Ashland, at the high school, especially whether it's companies like Edgenuity, EduSeer, or Virtual High School. We're looking at those options to be able to provide families and kids with high level, high quality, high accountability opportunities. Again, the elementary may look differently. I do have staff who falls under the same category as many of our students and families in terms of hesitancy to come back. They have underlying conditions, yet they want to teach and they want to help create a very robust remote learning platform. And a K-5 is different. As you know, elementary teachers teach all subject areas. And so they, if I've got 20 third graders, I might have a teacher who just does third grade remote learning for all students. So we've got a lot of opportunity here. And again, it goes back to having the data to determine what do we need to provide to our community. If we do return in some form, will parents have the ability to opt out and choose full-time remote learning? I just mentioned that. In reverse as well, if you're in remote learning after a period of time and you want to come back into the fold, whether it's hybrid or full in person, you absolutely have that ability as well. If we return to online learning, will the activities be similar to the spring or more robust? Way more robust. It's not going to be the same as the spring. I guarantee you that. And staff has been working hard at this. We're providing professional development opportunities, or will be providing even more opportunities. We are settling on a specific platform, Google Classroom, that's consistent across all of the buildings. We are also, the calendar, folks will ask about the school calendar. There's conversation at the state level as to required days of learning. 180 is what's Mass General Law, 990 hours at the high school, 900 elementaries. And what does that look like? And there could be adjustments to our current calendar. We're supposed to open up, I think, on September 2nd, if I'm not mistaken. But that date could be pushed back, and that determination will be happening in the next week and a half. The thought process behind that, with the commissioner as well as the state teachers unions, the Massachusetts Teachers Association, the Boston Teachers Union, and the American Federation of Teachers, is we want to provide our educators with enough time and professional development and ability to come back in and be ready for full remote if needed, or the hybrid model, but also then to provide families with opportunities to come into the school setting and learn the protocols and practices that we're going to require of students in small groups, in small settings, so families can gain an understanding of what we're doing and have some level of comfort that these are the steps we're taking to keep our children and our faculty and staff and community safe. Will the district consider adhering to the CDC's 6-foot social distancing rather than the less? I mentioned that is where we have landed, and I'm recommending. Will there be enough teachers for smaller classes and enough classes for the students since Mendez is already crowded? Depending upon the model that we have, the answer is yes. Again, we're looking at the reallocation of resources as staffing. But again, part of it is the data that we get on who is deciding to stay remote only. And that will help determine where our staff needs to be reallocated. Will there be exceptions to the rule that kids cannot go on different buses if parents cannot be home? Again, we will have that guidance a little bit later on. I mean, our initial reaction, or my initial reaction, has been to say, no, we need to keep our students on the same bus and within cohorts. But I understand and recognize there will be challenges for families, and we have to then, as I talk about, being flexible and looking at scenarios to ensure that children are have the care that they need when they leave our schools. We're also looking at extended day, the Champions, YMCA, local organizations that have and provide childcare. They are under different guidelines than we are in the Ashland Public Schools. So, they have to follow their guidance in terms of the number of students they can have, the number of kids they can care for. And I recognize the challenge they're under because their guidance hasn't changed yet. significantly to allow for a more robust care for students. I was wondering how pods of 10 or so students would work in the high school where kids have so many different classes. As someone who's taught at the high school, a high school principal, high school assistant principal, the high school and the middle school create lots of challenges with any model we choose. Because of the nature of high schools, where you have, in Ashland High School, we have 4 different levels, from college prep 1 up to advanced placement. We will have and try to design a program that has limited movement throughout the day, that allows kids to be able to partake in all classes that currently we offer at the high school. And the pods, or that were term used here, of 10 or so students, we believe we can do this and get all of our classes and what students need for classes in. I can't guarantee that, but again, it all depends on the makeup. What are the procedures when a child gets sick? I shared this with the community yesterday. The Department of Ed on Friday evening, which is what they do. This is why sometimes I can't give you information during the week. They tend to send it to superintendents on Friday night. Frustrating. But they have published a document for protocols for responding to COVID when in schools, students, buses, et cetera. We will follow that protocol. I'll be working with Audrey LaCroix, who is our head nurse, on these protocols. It will be part of the back to school reopening plan that I share with the community. So you'll be able to say, okay, this is what they're doing if a child comes in contact with someone, or on the bus. These are the procedures. And the one caveat is that the Department of Ed said these guidelines could change in the scenarios and how we react based on CDC guidance, which they're expecting to be updated in the next within the next week or so. So we do have a plan. I've shared it. I will again share it out in the community. It'll be I'll have it posted on our website as well. So if folks want to go ahead and read that document. It's pretty lengthy. It's about 20 pages. So I did not want to, I just sent a link yesterday. The one of the pieces of the initial guidance was that all districts create isolation rooms to separate students, faculty, et cetera, who may be presenting symptoms. So we have created those isolation rooms in every one of our buildings. Poor Sarah Davidson at Pitaway and Pete Regan at Warren have lost their offices. We are converting those because they are next to our guidance offices into our nursing offices. We are converting those into nursing suites. So we have a lot of flexibility there. That's our facilities and maintenance has been working hard at doing that, making sure they're appropriate settings that meet the isolation rooms. How will we protect the teachers, assistant teachers, custodians, support staff? And I've done this in the last couple, and administrators. I think we need to be protected as well. We're out in the buildings. We're out with kids as well. So we take this pretty seriously. While I know it's their job, it seems they have to put their health second. That is not the intention here at all. We want to make sure we are creating a work environment that is healthy and safe. And that's one of the reasons why I've landed on the 6 feet of space between students. But again, I think we can do what we can do. We need community assistance, families to adhere to the requirements that exist as set forth by the governor, using masks, practicing social distancing, doing those things. I get it when kids leave our schools, they're going to congregate. But can we minimize that? Can we, still emphasize the importance of the physical distancing? Will there be seasonally appropriate outdoor education as in the in-person plan? Absolutely. We are looking at purchasing tents, those open air banquet big tents to have opportunities for families to go outside or students to go outside with educators. The commissioner has repeatedly stated that utilizing the outdoor environment is something that he hopes that all districts will investigate and do. Ventilation assessment and systems, we have continuously been looking at our systems all summer, making sure that they are running efficiently, that they're meeting requirements as set forth within the actual companies who've installed our HVAC systems, changing the filters regularly, cleaning them regularly, making sure that the vents are free and clear of debris on top. Quite often in our classrooms, we tend to pile things up and it restricts airflow. Making sure that those classrooms with the windows have screens so we can open windows and create better airflow. We're investigating where we would have fans that push air out, obviously, so not circulating any aerosol, concerns within the classroom, but strategically placed to move air away from students and teachers. Much of the country is still seeing COVID-19. How do we know someone won't bring it to the area? I've stated we don't know. I'm asking for vigilance by each family and to use caution when your child is not well or you're not well. Don't go to work. I've told my teachers the same thing. That's going to cause some concern, obviously, with substitutes. How do we treat substitutes? Those are conversations that are still ongoing. When children are not feeling well, make sure they stay home. The complexity of determining, I'm a high allergy person, and I might show some symptoms of certain things of COVID because of my allergies. What do I do? Those are conversations, again, with our health professionals that we're trying to, tease out. What will in-person learning look like given rotating schedules at AHS? As I stated before, that is being worked on now, and principals will have specific detailed plans, which we will share, which is what is required to be submitted to the Department of Ed, and they will hold webinars for their buildings, okay? So you will get specific information. Ask about sports, again, that's not us. Will you consider changing start times? Yeah, we're looking at start times because we feel like in order to minimize risk, again, we're looking at staggered schedules a little bit and having less kids on buses and less kids coming to campus at the same time or leaving campus at the same time in all the schools. So we're certainly looking at all of those options, and we'll design hopefully a transportation in school start times that meet the needs for 2020, 2021, and then revert back to where we have been in the past. But yes, we are absolutely considering that. We can't have kids congregating. We can't have kids waiting 30 minutes, get off the bus and wait 30 minutes before they go into a classroom. We have to design a system that works better than that. IEP students, complications, how do we do better with special education? We recognize the fact too, my soon-to-be 8th grader is on an IEP. I certainly think the services that he were provided were not as in line with what his IEP stated that he should be getting. Very difficult to do remotely, for sure. And we are looking at and investigating all of our options for families. The Director of Student Services, Kathy Silva, is continually getting updates from the Department of Ed on what our requirements are, what we should be doing, and how we should be working with families. And again, I mentioned earlier about that vulnerable population of student that probably needs to be in school more than just 2 days out of a 5, or based on whatever model we choose. So we're working towards that. there was a question about Tripoli, and I how are we going to deal with Tripoli? And I said, not again, right? I mean, here we are. We started last year with Tripoli. We will follow the guidance and the directive of the Board of Health, exactly how we did last year. We have to, follow their protocols and processes they're going to put in place for the town of Ashland, should it become Ashland a high-risk area. Will district have a designated testing site? This was assuming we don't have the capacity to be testing students and families and teachers. The Department of Ed has made it clear within their guidance that it is not a recommendation that all people get tested. All students and teachers get tested before coming into schools. It's a concern of mine that we're having outside influences come in all the time, whether it's parent volunteers or substitutes. And we're thinking long and hard about probably not having parent volunteers this year at varying levels. But also, what do we do about our substitutes? And how do we mitigate any risk associated with having outside people come into the classrooms? We know folks are going to be out. So how do we deal with that? And no one has provided me a real plausible solution to this yet. So we're continually, batting this around. I work with about 100 other superintendents locally, where these are questions we're asking one another and trying to find solutions. Ashland is not working in isolation. I want to emphasize that. We are working with surrounding towns, the state level, national level, working with local unions, and working with our associations of superintendents and principals, et cetera. So there's a lot of work that's happening here behind the scenes, because as I said, once we ask one question and we think we have it answered, 4 more pop up on that specific topic. Yes, has APS thought about the practicality, parity, and safety of having K-1 students not in mask and grade 2 students in mask? I responded to that. I think, my recommendation will be that all students are in mask. Another question about how do I know someone won't bring COVID from different areas to Massachusetts? I don't know. Lunch is an issue, right? So one of the pieces of guidance that came with the initial guidance of June 25th was that school districts should consider that lunches be served in classrooms. My initial thought was, okay, how is this even manageable when, if we're 3 feet apart in the classrooms with our desks, so we can fit all the kids in, and in order to eat, the guidance is they have to be 6 feet apart so they can take their masks off. Logistically, that just doesn't work. We can't, if we could get all students in 6 feet into a classroom, then we would probably be full in-person learning, right? With the ability to do that and have lunch in the classrooms. Then it creates the issue of who's going to clean the rooms, disinfect them, sanitize them before the next round of class begins. So logistically, we're trying to develop plans that one, allow kids to eat in a safe environment where they can have their mask off, where there's space, where there's good, there's open space, airflow. It's also an opportunity for that half hour of lunch to have their mask off and take that break. So we're working hard and the types of food that we can deliver. Lisa Bowden, our director of nutrition services, is working with her organization. What are we going to do? How are we going to attack breakfast and lunch for our families? So that's certainly something that we're considering. School-specific webinars, absolutely. I presented that. These are the same questions. I just print them out. Okay, so again, I'm going to pause for about 5 seconds, have a sip, and then I'm going to answer the questions that are, looks like we got about 23 questions as part of the Q&A here. So let me pull those up and see which ones have come to the top. What steps are taken to make sure remote sessions are interactive where students can actively participate with Q&A and their classwork reviewed by teachers? Again, what I mentioned was we have to redo and rethink how we perform remote learning. And that has been a conversation we've had with our teaching staff. And we recognize the fact that we need more of the synchronous component, which is the in-person teaching aspect of it. But I do want to reiterate, there is a component of the asynchronous that is quite valuable with flipped classrooms in providing material and allowing students to investigate and go through time to work through problems, and then have the synchronous component where teachers are it's no longer not just a check-in, but actually reviewing the work and making sure and assessing the work. So I don't have the specifics yet, but we're working on making sure that it is a much more robust model. There are vendors, there are schools that have only remote learning, and those are the companies and school districts that we're trying to learn from to see how they approach this. Again, we are not a remote learning school. I want to be clear, but we're going to hopefully be able to develop a plan that is, highly comparable to what we're doing inside the classroom. It's really going to be difficult from an SEL standpoint and a social standpoint with kids, for sure, and teachers, and the connections that we make just naturally. What are the plans for if and when a student contracts COVID? What about if teacher? So Nathan, good question. And I mentioned this, I sent that out to the community. You may not have received it, but I will post it online. We will be using the Department of Ed's recommendations as guidelines by CDC. It's about a 19-page document. It's actually quite thorough. I'm reviewing it will be reviewing it with our nursing staff here and our health professionals in the Ashland Public Schools. But it is our baseline, our guidance of how we're going to approach these scenarios. So I will make sure that gets posted today on the website as well, the link to it. But I did email it to the community yesterday in one of our listservs. How much time is given to teachers prepare for such mode teaching? Some may not as comfortable with the technology. Will they get training? Yes. That's what we're talking about with regard to our calendar. We'll be offering professional development throughout the remainder of the summer on this topic, but also coming back to school. What I'd like to see is 5 to 7 real full professional development days for our teaching staff to ensure that they are ready to go with these models, hybrid, remote, et cetera. I assume the extended day will not be open. That's Rosetta. That's not accurate. EDP will be open. We don't know to what extent, but that will be dealt with. Ms. Melissa will be sending guidance on that. She'll be part of the document that we send to the community about our reopening. It will be part of that discussion. What is the expectation for the hybrid learning model on the home days? Could children within a cohort get together to learn together? Again, the expectations will be, depending upon the model we close in on, it will certainly be, students will be required to do a lot of work to prepare for the in-person learning. I give an example. I'll use an example from my wife. My wife was an AP Spanish teacher, and if in a certain remote hybrid model, so she's got a group of students, that is split up into two groups, a A group and a B group. On the first 2 days of school, she's got those kids coming in, she's teaching these live lessons to these students. Well, the students who are at home on Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, will have a asynchronous component. So probably a video that she has prepared with explanations as to what is occurring or what will be occurring when they come to school on Thursday and Friday. It will mirror some of the work that they're performing in the current Monday and Tuesday cohort. So students are still able to move forward. Now, when they come in on that Thursday, Friday, they're probably doing a little bit of review and then being able to move forward. The students who were already in class will have assignments that will reinforce what they learned, but then also have remote experience, again, most likely asynchronous, where there's a flipped classroom model where they're preparing for their next set of lessons on Monday and Tuesday. So it's really a lot of planning and preparation on teachers' side to ensure that, one, they're creating a rigorous experience, but one which kids can do and be prepared for the class time. That's why we need the prep and planning period, to the question earlier, in order to make sure our teaching staff feels comfortable and has the ability to deliver this type of model. As far as getting together with cohorts, again, I can't answer that for you. That's the question that you have to ask yourself in terms of are families going to be able to physically distance and work with one another. For both remote learning scenarios, will teachers do more Zoom meetings for instruction so that students are able to learn new material versus what? Yes, it's not going to be, it's going to be more rigorous. We have to move the curriculum forward. We have to assess. We have to hold kids accountable. Again, it will look different at different grade levels. I do not anticipate Zoom being the platform. We need consistency across the district. Google Classroom and Google Meets will be what we're focused on, and making sure that everyone is able to use those platforms. I did not address that. It's a good question. With regard to length of the school day, going to be altered, or will it be the same as what it is currently? It depends. The length of any of our school days is contractually negotiated. So we will be working towards and working with our local union if we have to make adjustments to start times, end times, and what that looks like. But that is actually something that has to be negotiated. We are absolutely in the process of looking at working conditions and how we have to adjust those. Will we consider reducing days off for vacations to get in as many days in school that we can? We will continue to follow the guidance of the Massachusetts Department of Education. We are required for 180 days. Any more days than that do require, again, it would require us to negotiate contracts, which to pay for additional days, which could be quite costly. And again, I want to be, cognizant. I want everyone to understand I'm cognizant of the fact of we have limited resources, and we want to make sure that we use our resources appropriately. And when we start adding days and adding more hours, that means we have to pay for those, and we've got to figure out how to do that. For remote learning, what are the guidelines to ensure that the teachers have reliable, fast internet? We had some challenges in the past based on the internet. I don't know if there's a guideline as much as if folks are struggling with internet, including families as well as our educators, then we need to know about it so we can investigate how to increase the capacity around the town, in our homes, et cetera. That is one of the initiatives, certainly of the state level, is to ensure that high quality, high speed internet is available to all members of the educational community. Will there be structured hours? Yes, there will be structured hours. We don't know what it looks like yet. I'm not going to provide that to you today, but absolutely, whenever we're dealing with the remote, we recognize the live interaction is important. Would AEHS consider having a more open campus for students so when they don't have class, they're allowed to leave? Maybe with a required GPA maintained. This could be, again, Cheryl, I think that's a conversation that needs to be addressed at the high school level. There are certainly concerns with open campuses from a liability standpoint of students coming and going. We do not want students leaving and then coming back. If you don't have a class, that's one thing. We already have that privilege for families and for students, that if they don't have a class, they don't have to come in early, or if they don't have a class at the end of the day, they can leave early. But to have a student come in for period 1 and then leave and then come back period 2, or period 3, excuse me, I've got great concern about that in terms of, I don't know where they're going. I don't know who they're hanging out with, things of that nature. Again, I want to be able to control what I can control. When would parents need to decide which plan would be best for their kids and family? Good question. I am hoping that families can decide in the next 7 to 10 days. I know it's a big ask of families, but I can't plan and organize the entire school district's calendar, schedules, model without that data. And like I said, I know and recognize that families will vacillate. They're going to go in between, I want to be here, I don't want to be here. Here's the data today, I'm going to change my mind. I get that. But for me to say you're going to commit 100% to whatever you choose, it's not, that's not going to happen, Brittany. I think we need to be flexible there as well. We just need to make sure that in order for us to plan appropriately, I need to have some numbers. That's all. Will having only 4 days in session limit how many classes will be able to be offered across all buildings? Example, specialists at Warren need all 5 days to get all classes. Would that need to start rotating? Again, we're looking at internally, those are conversations that are happening within the buildings, and should be happening within the buildings, and what it looks like. We want consistency for families as well across the district. There are families that have kids at Warren who have kids at the middle and the high school, et cetera, where whatever model we choose, we need to ensure that it works the best it can for families. I stated even last night to our faculty and staff, I am a proponent of the unified arts, the musics, the specials, the bands, health and wellness, PE, art, because many of our kids need that for not only their own, well-being, but that's their interest. And if we start to take those away just to focus on specific things, core classes only, we're going to do a disservice to our kids. And we need to certainly, kids may not get it, the special as much. It may rotate between, certain grade levels, but we want to continue to at least offer that. With remote learning, will teachers come with prepared slides and interactive sessions, or be more recorded present? It's going to be a combination of things. Remote portion of blended model is actually independent work, correct? Not live version. It depends, Lauren. Middle and high school, again, remote learning and virtual is yes, it'll be different at each grade level. If your child decides to be remote only, I would not anticipate it being directed by Ashland Public School educators. In a hybrid model, we're working with our teachers to ensure that whatever they're offering in the hybrid model, because again, teachers are teaching the full day, 4 out of the 5 days, and preparing lessons in one of the days for the remote aspect of things. We don't have enough teaching staff. We'd have to hire numerous staff in order to just do a remote component. Teachers are teaching all of their classes, and they're teaching them for longer periods of time. That's the one thing I mentioned, I failed to mention in a hybrid model, is teachers might be used to teaching say a 60-minute class. they're probably going to be moved to a 90-minute class, longer periods of time. So they're teaching the same amount of time, just in fewer blocks. So we have to be cognizant that whatever we're preparing is appropriate for the online or for the remote component, but it's also preparing students to be ready when they come into the classroom so we can move curriculum forward. Well, Ashland suggests we require additional protocols to what the state shared. For instance, what if a teacher's spouse had known exposure but hasn't tested positive yet? Should the teacher go to school or stay home where there's a highly likelihood they might have had exposure but don't have symptoms? We would ask that our teachers, our families use good common sense, and that we will continue to follow the guidance of local boards of health and the Department of Public Health. And that's all we can do. How much of remote learning will be live teaching within the? I can't answer that question. I'm not quite sure. I don't know, Rosetta, what that will look like yet. That is what's being developed. Yes, Chromebooks. Will you be rolling out the availability? We will make sure that every child within our district has a Chromebook who wants one. Every child. We have ordered them. Hopefully we'll have them in time. But that being said, we will have Chromebooks for every child in this district, any child who wants one and needs one. That is something that we've committed to. Will Pitaway also have the fully remote option? Not quite sure. Pitaway is very different, as you know. Pitaway is designed by law as an integrated preschool, which we're required to meet the needs of our special education students with peer role models, and we're working through what that looks like. The peer role models are paid, seats. We want to be thoughtful of how that impacts families and what that looks like. So we're continuing to look at that as well. Will kids and staff who enter Warren have their temperatures checked and be required to hand sanitize, wash hands at scheduled time? The former, meaning temperatures, no, we will not. That is not a recommendation at any level anymore. They've moved away from that. We will not be checking temperatures. Families will be responsible for that. Families will also be responsible for providing their kids masks. We will have masks in schools, plenty of masks to ensure that if we need to change them out, or if a kid needs one, that we can do that. As for sanitizing and washing, absolutely, those will be standard protocols throughout the day for our kids. That is proven to be right. Wearing masks and using washing hands and using hand sanitizer are the key components to reducing the spread, for sure. We look at this as an opportunity in terms of offering additional languages online, possibly in collaboration with other school districts, or pooling students for online AP prep for our kids to be prepared for subjects Ashland might not usually offer. So we do offer numerous online AP classes that we currently don't offer at Ashland High School through our virtual high school connection, which other districts subscribe to as well. So that exists currently. We are actually in conversation with local districts at potentially providing remote opportunities for our kids as well. So that is being discussed. I think we have an opportunity there to potentially create that experience, and I hope that if we don't necessarily get it fully running now, that the local superintendents are having that conversation. How does school choice work with online remote learning? Does it increase our capacity for Ashland High School? I'm not sure what that means. School choice are students who come into our district from other districts who have just feel that Ashland Public Schools are a better option for them. There are still our students. Once they're in, there are students, and they have to follow what we do unless they decide that whatever we're providing is not the model they want to be in, then they can choose to go back to their school district. Will remote learning offer specials as well? Yes, I'm committed to ensuring that our students experience the full educational delivery model that we would have in person for our students. What assistance can families of children who are younger work less independently? Should schools shut down or go back to, let me read this again, sorry. What assistance can families of children who are younger work less independently on assignments expect? Should schools shut down or go back to blended online instruction only? So what assistance can we provide is what I'm taking away from that, Christina. So please correct me if I'm reading this poorly. I think part of the discussion we've had internally is I think we need to actually provide professional development for our families and how we utilize remote learning and the expectations of children and families. And I think, I don't know, I mean, I think about my own family and what assistance I could give my children. You know, I was a history major and an accounting major, but I can't do calculus or chemistry at a high level with my oldest son. And so it's not just the younger students, but our older students. But I get the independent piece. I think maybe, hopefully, our remote component will be more robust, where our faculty is guiding our children a little more. It's not a good answer for you, but I'll think about that one more. Will students get training? Yes, I think we certainly need to provide students and families, as I just mentioned, with training on how to utilize the remote learning. Do you plan to have office hours for a one-to-one interaction in case student need? I don't, you know, what our remote learning looks like will be very different. Do I think there's an opportunity to have that interaction? Yes. Do I think it's going to look like the remote, the one-to-one office hours that we had in the spring? I don't think so, but that doesn't mean we're not creating opportunities for children to meet and ask questions. There are numerous models out there that require, and requires the word. It's an accountability piece that requires students, every student, whether you're remote or in person, that you're online, checked in at a certain time, so students can ask questions amongst the whole group. And at the end of the day, where there's a component where students can check in and close the day out appropriately. So we're looking at all those types of models. There's a lot of benefit to having every day, whether you're remote learning or you're in person in a hybrid, where there's the initial connection to the day. Similarly, at the end of the day. So, you know, in those, you know, the models I've reviewed have that as an absolute requirement of students, and it goes to their attendance and it goes to their grading. So, okay, it's about 9:22. It looks like we've cleared up all the questions. I don't mean we've cleared up all of the questions in terms of what you really have, just the questions that are in the queue, because I have numerous questions myself. And I'm looking at this, just so you know, I look at this not only from a superintendent lens, but as a parent myself. And how is it going to, you know, how will it impact my family? How does it impact everybody else's family when the decisions are made? I know, you know, Dr. Kyra's got young kids in our school. We have our principals have kids at varying grade levels and in different districts. And how is that working? We're factoring in all these things. Like I said at the beginning, I don't have all the answers. I've got more questions than I have answers. We'll put together a document that we'll send and say, this is how we're starting. But we need to be flexible. We need to be adaptable in order to move as we see the landscape of education, COVID change. And we will do our best to make sure that we are providing a healthy, safe environment for our 2,800 students, our 400 plus workers, educators, dedicated professionals. And that's our first and foremost concern, is that we have that environment. Because once you have a safe working environment, a safe learning environment, that's when education and the delivery of education and the knowledge that can be passed along is at its best. So thank you for your time this morning. I appreciate it. Please be on the lookout for your the surveys. Again, I'll keep it short. I'm sure you're tired of surveys. I'm tired of sending them, but they're valuable to us and to me in terms of to see what folks are thinking, and it helps me design a plan. And as I said, I know whatever plan or plans we land on will not meet the needs of every one of our community members and our families, and for that I'm sorry. We'll present a plan that we think is what's the best, least impactful option for our community of educators, community of learners. So, and the folks who send our kids to school and need to be employed. I'm not naive to the fact that we need to, be open so folks can go back to work. I get that, and that's what makes some of this quite challenging. So, but my ultimate job is to care for your children, and my teaching staff and my support staff and my administrative assistants, et cetera, as an employer as well. So thank you so much. Thank you, WACA, for taking the time to record this again and send it out. And we will also be having numerous webinars, building based in the coming weeks after our plan is made. So again, thank you.